Welcome to True Echo, where the loudest voices aren't always the ones with the biggest titles. Here we share real stories of injustice, redemption, and quiet strength that ripple through society and spark change. Today's story is one that begins with prejudice in a showroom and ends with transformation, not just of individuals but of an entire system. This is about what happens when a single mother, overlooked and humiliated, refuses to stay silent, and the man who once walked away returns not for love, but to stand beside her in truth. When I walked into Montclair Prestige Motors for the first time, I didn't expect a warm welcome. But I didn't expect to be humiliated either. It was a Wednesday morning, and I had taken a half day off from my 2 part-time jobs to come in person. My sister, Carla, had just finished her last round of radiation therapy, and though she barely had enough strength to hold her coffee cup some days, I knew one thing for certain: she had survived. After 2 years of watching her fight for her life, clawing through pain that made her bones feel like fire and her skin feel like glass, she deserved something beautiful. Something extraordinary. And that car, the Midnight Onyx Coupe, was the closest thing I had found that matched her spirit. Powerful, elegant, unapologetically bold. I wasn't dressed to impress. Faded jeans, a white t-shirt, and old Converse shoes. I hadn't worn makeup in weeks. My curly hair was tied up and my backpack had fraying seams. But I wasn't there to be admired. I was there to make a purchase. One I'd spent months saving for, researching, planning. I'd sold my mother's condo share. I'd worked every freelance shift possible. This wasn't a whim. It was a tribute. The second I stepped in, the air shifted. A young receptionist offered a mechanical hello, barely looking up from her screen. A nearby salesman gave me a glance that traveled from my shoes to my bag and then away, like I was a misplaced object. And then he appeared, Ethan Grant. I'd read about him before. One of those high-performing managers who prided himself on intuition, closing energy, and knowing a customer's worth from across the room. His hair was slicked back like a 1950s news anchor, his suit dark, expensive, aggressively tailored. He didn't shout or sneer, but every word from his mouth carried the weight of a door being closed before it was ever opened. "Sorry miss, this isn't the used lot," he said with a smirk after I asked to see the coupe. I tried to stay calm. "I'd like to see the interior. That one's by appointment only. Serious customers usually call ahead." I should have said something. Defended myself. Shouted that I had every right to be there. But I didn't. I simply nodded and walked out. And even as the glass door swung behind me, I could still hear faint laughter from a staff member and feel the eyes of a customer burning on the back of my head. I didn't cry. Not then. Not later. But I did walk home slowly, each step a weight pressing into me, not because of my old shoes, but because of the quiet question that had followed me since the day I became a mother. When did the world decide I wasn't enough? That night, I tucked my daughter Maya into bed and sat on our tiny balcony with a cup of tea gone cold. The apartment was still. Carla was resting. And I found myself staring at an old photo on the shelf, me and Damon. A younger me. A younger him. Smiling at the world we thought we could conquer. It had been over 6 years since I heard from him. He'd disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. Not out of cruelty, I've always believed. Out of fear. We were both so young. He had just landed a major investment for his startup. I was 2 semesters away from graduating Stanford with honors. And then life happened. He sent a single text: "I can't. I'm sorry." Then silence. I spent nights hating him. Then days forgiving him. And eventually years moving forward. Until he became someone I didn't need anymore. But that night, as I sat under the pale Boston moonlight, I opened my old email draft folder and typed, "Do you have time tomorrow? I'm not coming because I need something. I'm coming because someone needs to see what true value looks like." I pressed send. And when the email vanished into cyberspace, I didn't feel triumphant or hopeful. I felt neutral. I wasn't even sure he'd respond. But this wasn't about him. This was about making people like Ethan Grant see what they had refused to acknowledge. Not power. Not money. But worth. The kind of worth they couldn't measure in designer heels or business cards. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Carla was still asleep. Maya curled up like a kitten under her blanket. I dressed in the exact same clothes, jeans, t-shirt, Converse. Not because I had no choice, but because I wanted them to remember me. I wanted them to see the same woman and learn to see her differently. I walked to the dealership, my head held high, and stepped through the glass doors like I belonged there. Because I did. Ethan was pouring espresso for a customer in a gray suit. He turned the moment he saw me. His polite mask slipped just a little, revealing that same flicker of irritation, like I was gum stuck on a polished shoe. "Back again, are we?" he said loud enough for others to hear. I nodded. "I'd like to see the interior. And if possible, I'll buy it today." Ethan laughed. Not loudly, but just enough to hurt. "This is a $295,000 car. People who buy it don't walk in off the street. They have appointments. They have standards." I said nothing. But someone else did. "Miss Jasmine, sorry to interrupt," came a voice behind me. It was Kenny, the young salesman I'd seen the day before. "If you're still interested in the coupe, I can give you a more detailed introduction." I turned. And for the first time that morning, I smiled. "Thank you. I'd love that." As Kenny explained the V8 hybrid engine, mocha leather interior, and traction system, Ethan hovered in the distance. He was watching. And I knew something in him was starting to itch. The kind of itch you get when you realize the story you told yourself about someone is about to unravel. But I wasn't done. Because I hadn't come alone. Just as Kenny finished his pitch, I pulled out my phone. Dialed one number. The one I never thought I'd use again. It rang once. Then twice. And when he answered, all I said was, 10 a.m. Montclair Motors. "You once told me value isn't in appearance. Time to prove it." Then I hung up. I didn't need him to save me. I just needed him to stand there. So when they saw me, they'd finally see. At 9:56 a.m., the low hum of an engine stirred the glass showroom into a quiet curiosity. Heads turned. Even Ethan's espresso cup paused halfway to his lips. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, black, flawless, gliding like it owned the asphalt, pulled into the customer loop. It didn't roar. It whispered wealth. The kind of wealth that made even the air feel different. I didn't move. I didn't have to. I saw Ethan's eyes narrow, his posture shift, and in that moment, I knew I had his full attention. The door of the Rolls opened, and out stepped a man in charcoal slacks and a blazer so perfectly cut it looked poured on. He wasn't flashy. No diamond watches or loud accessories. Just confidence. The kind that didn't need to speak. Damon Cole. 6 years older, a little taller, and somehow, quieter. His face had lost its boyish charm and taken on something firmer. Lines of growth, gravity, and success. But his eyes were unmistakable. Still the same sharp hazel that once watched the world like it was a puzzle he could solve in his sleep. He walked straight in, no hesitation, no swagger, just presence. Ethan's face lit up like a light switch had been thrown. "Mr. Cole?" he stammered, adjusting his tie, stepping forward like a butler at Buckingham. "Welcome. I didn't know. I mean, had I known you were visiting, we'd have prepared a private space." Damon didn't respond immediately. His eyes scanned the showroom. Then he looked past Ethan, locking eyes with me. He smiled. Not big. Not fake. Just enough. "Actually," he said slowly, "I'm not here for you. I'm here for her." He pointed at me. Ethan's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. I beg your pardon?" Damon walked past him like he didn't exist. Stopped 2 feet from me. "Jasmine," he said gently, "you look exactly the same." I raised an eyebrow. "You're lying." "I look exhausted." He grinned. "Okay, maybe a little." The tension cracked just enough to let a flicker of humor in. But the air was still heavy. All eyes were on us. "I assume you still want the coupe?" he asked. I nodded. "Then let's buy it." "No financing?" "Cash." You could hear the gears grinding in Ethan's head. He tried to recover, stepping between Damon and me with the precision of a man still grasping at control. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. Had I known she was with you, I would've." "You would've what?" Damon interrupted, voice calm but razor-edged. "Treated her like a human being?" Ethan blinked. Damon turned to me. "Did he disrespect you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The entire dealership had already witnessed enough. Damon turned back to Ethan. "I came here to buy a car. But now I think I'm buying a lesson." He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and walked toward the coupe. "Phil." "Yeah." "Tell acquisitions to start pulling valuation reports on Montclair Motors. Every branch." Ethan's face turned the color of chalk. "Sir, I don't understand." "I own part of Carson Equity," Damon replied without looking up. "We've been reviewing portfolios for new takeovers. Montclair wasn't on the list. Until today." Ethan stumbled. "Wait, this dealership is a top performer." Damon looked at him flatly. "Then you won't mind us looking a little closer." For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't a performance. This was real. This was the kind of moment you don't recover from. Damon walked back to me and handed me the keys. "I had them prep the interior the way you described in the email," he said softly. "Mocha trim. Champagne leather. And a sound system Carla would appreciate. My throat caught. I couldn't speak. Not yet. Damon, I didn't bring you here for this, I whispered. I know, he said. You brought me here so they'd see. I'm just giving them the rest of the picture. He turned toward the staff. This woman raised a daughter on her own, cared for her dying sister, worked 2 jobs, and still came here with enough dignity to keep her head high even after being humiliated. She didn't ask me to buy her a car. She doesn't need me. But I needed to see this. And then he said the words that would echo across every branch of Montclair by the end of the day. If this is how you treat strong women, then maybe it's time someone stronger took your keys. Silence. A storm cloud of disbelief and awe filled the space. Ethan opened his mouth to speak. But a younger associate, Kenny, quietly stepped forward instead. Miss Turner, he said nervously, I'd like to personally apologize. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to schedule a free service plan for the car. You deserve that much. I smiled. Not because I wanted free service, but because someone had finally seen me. Not the clothes, not the shoes, me. Outside, as the sun lit up the coupe's hood, Damon walked me to the driver's side. I don't want anything, he said. No second chances. No let's catch up. I just wanted you to know. I never forgot you. And I never stopped hoping you were okay. I hesitated. Then said, I'm better than okay. He nodded. I drove off slowly, the engine humming beneath me, the windows down, the city wide open ahead. In the rearview mirror, I saw Damon turn back to Ethan, phone still pressed to his ear. Some men buy companies out of profit. Some buy them out of principle. And some do both. By the time I turned onto the freeway, the emotional turbulence hadn't settled, but it had shifted. I wasn't trembling anymore. The hurt, the humiliation. It hadn't disappeared, but it had been forced to share space with something far more powerful. Proof. Not just for them. For me. For every moment I doubted whether staying quiet was the right path, whether letting others underestimate me had robbed me of something I could never get back. But I didn't explode, I didn't cry, I didn't scream to be seen. I just stood. And somehow that was louder than all of it. That afternoon, back home in Northwood, Maya came running into the kitchen barefoot, her curls bouncing wildly. Mommy? Did you get the car? She shouted, her voice shrill with excitement. I knelt down and pulled her into a tight hug. We got it, baby. And it's beautiful. Just like Aunt Carla. She grinned wide, then tilted her head with curiosity. Can I sit in it? Tomorrow, I laughed. Today it's Aunt Carla's turn. Carla had fallen asleep on the couch, her head wrapped in a soft scarf, her skin pale but glowing. She looked fragile. But not weak. Never weak. I placed the key fob on the table beside her, next to a cup of tea that had gone cold. She stirred, groggy-eyed. What time is it? Almost 6, I said gently. I brought something for you. She blinked, still dazed. Then her gaze fell on the key. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. She reached out slowly, picked it up like it was something sacred. No, she whispered. Jas, no, you didn't. I did. Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling over with a silent shiver. I can't accept that, she said, her voice cracking. It's too much. You've already done everything. You accepted cancer, I interrupted, my voice firm but soft. You accepted hair loss, chemotherapy, vomiting, pain. You accepted being stared at by strangers like you were a cautionary tale. This is a car, Carla. You survived. You deserve something that makes you feel whole again. She covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing quietly. I sat beside her. They laughed at me, Carla. Laughed like I was a joke in that showroom. But I didn't walk out small. I walked out with the car. And with dignity. We sat together, saying nothing, just letting the weight of everything drift in the silence between sisters. The next morning, Kenny from the dealership called. I hope it's not too early, Miss Turner, he said awkwardly. Mr. Maddox, our general manager, wanted to personally reach out and offer you an official apology and a refund for your purchase tax. I blinked, surprised. That's generous. And, he'd also like to invite you to consult on a customer equity program we're trying to pilot across all branches. I paused. A car dealership asking a single mom to teach them about dignity? That was a twist I hadn't seen coming. I'll think about it, I said. But I won't teach theory. I only teach by truth. That's exactly why he wants you. Later that week, a message popped up in my inbox. From Damon. It was just a short line. I hope you'll consider speaking at Caltech's Leadership Summit this quarter. It's not a favor, it's a necessity. I stared at the screen for a long time. Was it really happening? Was the world actually listening now? I responded simply. I'll speak. But I won't talk about business. I'll talk about how not to lose your soul while chasing it. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call. Ethan Grant. His voice was raw, stripped of its typical oil-slick smoothness. Miss Turner. Jasmine. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not just for what happened in that showroom, but for every moment I've spent in my career confusing wealth with worth. I didn't see you and I didn't care to. And now I can't unsee it. I didn't rush to forgive. I let him speak. I volunteered to serve at the Hope Walkers Gala next month, he continued. I requested it. I want to show up not for optics. Just to start fixing what I broke. That's not something you fix in a night, I said. I know, he replied. But I need to learn what you already understand. That respect doesn't trickle down. It walks side by side. I hung up without saying goodbye. Not out of cruelty, but because I believed him. And I knew growth wasn't a speech. It was service. At the next board meeting at Caltech, Damon introduced me as the new advisor for community reintegration. Not a title I asked for, but one he said the company needed more than another consultant in a tailored suit. I walked into that glass-walled room full of executives and spoke with the same calm voice I used with Maya. Diversity is not an aesthetic. It's not a number on a graph or a brochure slogan. It's the oxygen in a room where people have forgotten how to breathe together. There was no applause, but there were eyes, focused, quiet, uncomfortable, and maybe that was better. That was how change started. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Carla got behind the wheel of her new car. We drove nowhere special. Just down the coast. The ocean air tangled her scarf and she sang softly to a Whitney Houston track on the stereo. She didn't need to say thank you. She'd earned that moment. And as I watched her smile in the rearview mirror, I remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when he first realized who I was. Not the founder of Hope Walkers. Not Damon's ex. Just a woman he couldn't ignore anymore. The gala was only 10 days away, and the energy at Hope Walkers felt electric. Volunteers buzzed in and out of the center like bees, carrying rolls of tablecloths, donation boxes, and stacks of flyers. Most of them didn't know what had happened at Montclair Motors. To them, I was still just Jasmine, the founder who rarely rested, the woman who knew every child by name, who could hold a clipboard in one hand and soothe a meltdown with the other. But behind every checklist I triple-checked, behind every thank you card I signed by hand, my mind was still circling that moment in the showroom. Not out of vengeance, but because it still lingered like a bruise, dull, quiet, and deeply real. Damien hadn't called again. He hadn't sent flowers, hadn't asked to meet. And somehow that meant more than any apology ever could. He had understood. He had stood beside me when it counted. Then he had stepped back, leaving space for me to walk forward alone. That night, Maya curled into my side on the couch after brushing her teeth. "Will Mr. Damien be at the party?" she asked suddenly. I paused. "Maybe," I said. "Do you want him to be there?" She thought for a moment. "I think he's nice. But he's not my dad, right?" "No, sweetheart. He's not your dad." She nodded as if confirming something in her own mind. Then whispered, "But he helped you feel brave." And for the second time that week, a child said something that cut straight through the noise of everything I thought I knew. Bravery isn't about walking alone. Sometimes it's about who shows up and says, "I see you. Keep going." The day of the gala arrived with bright skies and crisp autumn air. I wore a simple navy blue dress, not because I wanted to look fancy but because it made me feel grounded. My sister Carla, radiant in a soft beige wrap dress, walked beside me into the Fairmont ballroom, arm in arm. "You sure about this?" she whispered. "No," I admitted. "But we've already walked through fire. This is just a room." Inside, the lights were dimmed to gold. Banners with the Hope Walkers emblem hung behind the stage. Tables were dressed in white linens and lit with floating candles. Soft jazz played in the background as guests trickled in, parents, doctors, therapists, business partners, donors, and volunteers. That's when I saw him. Ethan. But not the Ethan I remembered from Montclair. This Ethan moved with a kind of unsure humility. Gone were the sharp-shouldered blazers and mirror-polished shoes. He wore a Hope Walkers vest over a light blue button-down, sleeves rolled up, balancing a tray of fruit cups. He wasn't putting on a performance. He wasn't looking for recognition. He was working. Quietly, earnestly, wiping down chairs, guiding elderly guests to their seats. At one point, I watched him stop to tie the shoelace of a child in a wheelchair, using both hands with slow precision. When the child looked up at him and asked, "Are you the boss?" Ethan smiled gently and replied, "Not today." Today I'm just someone who helps. That evening, during the keynote, I took the stage with a microphone in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. My palms were slightly sweaty. I looked out at the crowd. Carla beamed from the front row. Kenny sat beside her, clapping hard, still in his wrinkled shirt and old sneakers, now known affectionately in the community as the one who spoke up. And off to the side, standing in the shadows near the sound equipment, was Damien. No spotlight. No fanfare. Just presence. I unfolded the paper and began. We talk a lot about strength in this world. Especially when it comes to overcoming hardship. We think strength is never crying. Or working 3 jobs. Or beating cancer. And yes, those things are strong. But strength, I've come to realize, is also something else. It's walking into a room that once humiliated you, and holding your head high. It's forgiving without forgetting. It's letting someone who once hurt you pick up a cup and serve the children you love. Because real power isn't in revenge. It's in restoration. And when someone is willing to change, not for optics but for truth, we don't just restore them. We restore the system that broke us in the first place. There was no standing ovation. But the quiet was deafening. A few people wept. One woman covered her mouth. And Damien? He didn't move. But I saw the slight rise in his chest, the inhale of someone swallowing a lesson deeper than any business school ever taught him. After the speech, I stepped off stage and took a moment to catch my breath backstage. That's when I noticed Ethan, crouched in the corner helping a young boy adjust his leg braces. He looked up, caught my eye, and didn't say a word. But in his gaze I saw something new. Not shame. Not fear. But the beginnings of peace. I nodded. He nodded back. Nothing else was needed. Later that night, after the last chair had been stacked and the last child had fallen asleep in a parent's arms, I stood on the empty ballroom floor, barefoot, holding the worn leather shoes I had worn through that dealership. Carla came up behind me and squeezed my hand. "Was it everything you needed it to be?" she asked. I looked around the room. Thought of the showroom. The humiliation. The apology that turned into action. The people who changed not because they were forced, but because they were given the chance to. I smiled. It was more. As we walked out under the streetlights, I heard someone call my name softly. It was Ethan, standing beside a city bus with 3 children in tow. One of them, Thomas, waved enthusiastically. "I told him he could join my Saturday basketball group," Thomas said. "You're coaching now?" I raised an eyebrow, amused. Ethan scratched his head. "Assistant coach. Water boy. Janitor. Whatever they need." I chuckled. "Good. Just remember, coaching isn't about winning. It's about making sure no one quits." As the bus doors closed and the children waved goodbye, I saw Ethan linger in the back seat, one hand pressed to the window. And I knew. He'd never walk into a room the same way again. The following Monday, the staff at Montclair Prestige Motors gathered inside the sleek glass-walled conference room, where they were used to discussing commissions, upsells, and brand upgrades, but today it was something entirely different. A printed agenda titled Bias Training Session Number 1, led by Hope Walker's initiative, sat neatly on every chair. No one dared be late. Ethan arrived early. Not because he was instructed to. Because he wanted to. The gala had done something to him, softened a part that he hadn't even known had been hardened by years of silent judgment. He had served drinks, wiped tables, heard children call him Mr., and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like someone trying to impress. He just felt human. Now, seated next to Kenny, who had been officially promoted, Ethan kept his hands folded and eyes focused. Kenny whispered, "Nervous?" Ethan nodded. "Terrified." Kenny smiled. "Good. That means you're listening." The door opened. Jasmine walked in holding a small folder and a cup of black coffee. No dramatic entrance. No accusatory stare. She wore the same worn shoes, paired with slacks and a gray cardigan. But this time no one glanced at her outfit. They saw her. Richard Maddox stood to greet her, not out of courtesy, but respect. "Miss Turner," he said, "we're ready when you are." "Then let's begin," Jasmine replied gently. For the next 2 hours, Jasmine didn't lecture. She didn't guilt trip. She didn't name names or replay the incident. Instead, she guided them through quiet reflection. "What do you see when someone walks in wearing jeans and sneakers?" she asked. No one spoke. "What did you feel the last time someone didn't match your expectations?" Silence again. Then Jasmine walked over to a whiteboard and drew a simple triangle. "At the top is the customer you think matters," she said. "At the bottom are the people you think don't. Every time you decide who belongs where based on clothes, accent, or skin tone, you're not just failing them. You're failing yourself." One of the saleswomen, Monica, raised her hand. But sometimes, appearances are clues, right? About someone's seriousness. Jasmine didn't scold. She just nodded and asked, "What does seriousness look like?" That was when Ethan spoke. "I used to think it looked like Rolex watches and Gucci belts," he said. "Turns out it looks more like someone walking into a dealership with purpose, despite knowing no one will respect her. That's courage. That's seriousness." Jasmine met his eyes. Just a small glance. But it was enough. Later, during the break, Ethan stood alone on the balcony behind the dealership. Richard walked out, his jaw tight as always but his shoulders somehow less squared. "I was wrong," Richard said abruptly. Ethan turned, startled. "I always believed a good manager could read people," Richard continued. "But all I did was read the surface." Ethan looked down at his coffee. "I did more than that. I made assumptions and hid behind procedures. I hurt someone good." "You're fixing it," Richard said. "That's more than most do." They stood there in silence. Not boss and employee. Just two men unpacking their own reflections. Back inside, Jasmine concluded the session with one final exercise. She handed out blank index cards and asked one question. "Write down the name of someone you misjudged, and what you wish you'd done differently." No one was forced to share. But one by one, people began placing the cards into a box at the front labeled, "Lessons Learned." Ethan's card read, "Jasmine Turner. I wish I had asked her story before I assumed her value." At the end of the session, as people filed out, Jasmine gathered her notes. Ethan approached her slowly, his voice quiet. "Can I ask you something?" Jasmine looked up. "Do you think people like me can really change?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at him, not through him, not around him, but into him. Then said, "I don't know if people can change overnight. But I know they can begin." Ethan breathed in deeply, like someone surfacing from underwater. Then he reached into his folder and handed her a draft. It was a new dealership policy. Titled, "The Jasmine Turner Clause, Zero Tolerance for Appearance-Based Discrimination." Beneath the title were bullet points. All staff must complete quarterly bias and empathy training. Clients may not be profiled or discouraged based on dress, background, or perceived wealth. Frontline employees may override managerial decisions in cases of suspected prejudice. Any reported discrimination will result in review by an independent ethics board. "This is yours now," Ethan said. "Whether I stay here or not." Jasmine held the paper in her hands. The ink wasn't even dry. She looked up. "What made you write this?" He paused. Then said simply, "Because for the first time in my life I realized I don't want to be right. I want to be decent." That evening, Jasmine returned home to find a small wooden box waiting at her doorstep. No return address. Inside was a car key. And a silver inscription. "To Carla, you won twice." Her breath caught. She opened the door to find Carla crying quietly on the couch, staring at the photo of the midnight Onyx coupe now sitting in their small driveway. I can't believe it," Carla stammered. "You should," Jasmine said, gently placing a hand on her back. "You earned it." They stood together at the window, watching the light catch on the mirror like paint. No crowds. No press. Just the quiet echo of a world slowly turning toward something better. The day the car was officially delivered to Carla Turner was unlike any event Montclair Prestige Motors had ever seen, not because of the glitz but because of the absence of it. No balloons. No champagne. No marketing team. Just a few staff members gathered in silence, hands loosely clasped in front of them, as Jasmine and her sister walked slowly toward the gleaming midnight Onyx coupe waiting at the curb. Carla's eyes were wide, disbelieving. I don't think I should be the one getting this," she whispered to Jasmine. "I lost my hair, my body changed, and I barely even made it through." Jasmine turned to her. "Exactly. You didn't just survive, Carla. You endured. Every scar you carry is proof that you kept showing up. This car isn't about luxury. It's a message, to you and to every woman who's ever been told her fight didn't matter." Kenny, who now wore a simple black Montclair name tag that read, "Lead Advisor, Equity Division," stepped forward and handed Carla the keys in a handcrafted wooden box. On the lid, a single word was carved. Dignity. He smiled, eyes shining with quiet pride. "It's not about the engine, the leather, or the price tag. It's about who's behind the wheel." Carla ran her hands along the stitching of the driver's seat, then turned to Jasmine and hugged her tightly. The kind of hug that held everything they had been through, sleepless nights, hospital corridors, the silence of waiting for test results. "I love you," Carla whispered. "I love you for never letting me forget who I was." Jasmine didn't reply right away. She only closed her eyes and held tighter. Richard Maddox stood nearby, arms behind his back, watching them. He had just authorized the dealership's new sponsorship program, fully funding scholarships for single mothers and women of color in automotive tech training schools, with Jasmine Turner's name at the top of each certificate. As Carla drove the car off the lot, the staff clapped, not out of obligation, but because they understood that something greater than a vehicle had just changed hands. And behind them, tucked beside the showroom's new customer values pledge, a framed photograph had been installed. Jasmine and Carla standing beside the midnight onyx coupe, smiling, not because they were rich but because they were finally seen. That night, Jasmine sat on the balcony of her apartment. The lavender plant had started to bloom again. She held the silver ring in her hand, the one Damien had given her all those years ago, and turned it over slowly between her fingers. She didn't wear it. She didn't need to. Some gifts weren't meant to be worn. They were meant to remind. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. From D. Cole. Message: the children's wing at City Medical Center is ready. The Hope Walker's room has a plaque with your name. I didn't do it for forgiveness. Just for truth. Jasmine stared at the message for a long time, then typed 2 words in reply. Thank you. And then she turned off the phone. A few days later, she was invited to give a keynote at Suffolk University. The lecture hall wasn't large, but it was packed with community development students, many of them first-generation college attendees, young people searching for how to build meaning in a world obsessed with appearance. Jasmine wore the same faded jeans, the same white shirt. She walked up to the stage with a quiet smile. I'm not here to teach you how to succeed, she began. I'm here to teach you how to not lose yourself when the world tries to define you. The students leaned forward. Some people will only see you for your shoes, your accent, your silence. They'll look at your scars, your stories, your weight, your skin, and decide you're not worth listening to. And you'll be tempted to believe them. But don't. Because the moment you choose to define your worth by their lens, you've handed over the one thing they should never control, your dignity. The room was still. No one blinked. In a car showroom, I was humiliated. And I didn't fight back with money or anger or status. I fought back by being consistent, by being myself. And someone saw that. That changed everything. In the back row, Ethan Grant sat quietly. He wore a volunteer badge now, not a title. Not a suit. Just a man listening like a student who missed too many years of class and was now trying to make up for them. When the talk ended, Jasmine stepped off the stage and made her way to the refreshments. As she poured herself a cup of tea, she noticed a folded note left near the stack of paper cups. She opened it. Thank you for not holding a grudge. You left the door open and I walked through. E.g. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just folded the paper and placed it in her bag, among the lesson plans, flyers for the next Hope Walker's fundraiser, and an old drawing Maya had made, a stick figure of a woman beside a heart, labeled Mom is the Strongest. Later that week, Jasmine returned to the showroom, not for a car but for a meeting with the staff to review the final workshop results. This time, no one glanced at her shoes. No one tried to redirect her to a used car lot. Instead, they greeted her with respect, not performance. As she entered the training room, she noticed something new above the whiteboard. A sign in bold black letters. The Jasmine Turner policy. Do not judge. Do not discriminate. Every person deserves respect from the first glance. She ran her fingers along the edge of the plaque, feeling the raised lettering. It wasn't validation. It was victory. Not just for her but for everyone who had ever been asked, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" 3 weeks after the last Hope Walker's event, Jasmine stood in the parking lot of a newly opened therapy center in Dorchester, her hands folded across her chest as she watched a group of children laughing near the entrance. The sun hung low, casting long shadows, but her silhouette was steady, anchored not by pride but by peace. Behind her, a modest silver plaque had just been installed on the front steps. The Carla Turner Center for Pediatric Resilience. You are not your scars. You are your survival. Carla, now working as a full-time counselor at the facility, stood nearby with a clipboard and a nervous smile. Her energy was calmer now, softer in the way people who've been to the edge and returned tend to move. You know, she said, glancing at the center's sliding glass doors, I used to think strength was in fighting the disease. But the real strength was in coming back and giving from it. Jasmine nodded. That's the part no one sees. What you do after survival. She was about to say more when a black Tesla quietly pulled up to the curb. Damien stepped out, this time not in a suit, but in a gray sweater and jeans. His hair was tousled by the wind, his stance less polished than before, but more human. He walked over holding a file folder. "I brought the proposal for the national outreach expansion," he said. "We've got the board's approval for a 5-year sponsorship, $15 million in total, rolling grants for families with autistic and disabled children. No strings. No branding." Jasmine took the folder without a word. She flipped through the first few pages, then looked up. "What made you do this, Damien?" He paused. His eyes scanned the children playing across the courtyard, then returned to her face. "Because once I walked away from something good thinking I wasn't ready. And now that I am, I realize some things don't wait forever. But the least I can do is build the world we once talked about." He didn't expect her to forgive him. He didn't expect her to let him back in. And Jasmine didn't. But she extended her hand to shake his, firm, steady, and respectful. "Then build it. Not for me. For the ones watching." They stood there in a moment of mutual truth. Not love reborn, but accountability reclaimed. Damien smiled faintly and returned to the car. As he drove away, Jasmine turned back to the center. Carla was waving at a boy with crutches, and in the background, a mural was being painted on the side of the building by local teens. Bright blues, defiant reds, a sunrise cresting over the silhouette of a girl holding a torch. And above her head, one line in bold letters. "True value doesn't wear a label. It walks in." Meanwhile, at Montclair Prestige Motors, changes had become permanent. There were new signs posted at the entrance, not ads for car models but quotes from customers. Real voices. Real lessons. The showroom floor was no longer silent when a casually dressed customer walked in. In fact, some of the highest-tier clients began referring new buyers to Montclair, praising its radical respect approach. And Ethan Grant? He never asked to be manager again. Instead, he continued working with Caltech's new equity integration program, where he facilitated mentorship between business leaders and at-risk youth. Once a week, he visited Hope Walkers to co-teach social empathy workshops to high school interns. He still wore the same gray vest from the gala. It was faded now, stained slightly on one sleeve from juice spilled by a boy in a wheelchair. But he never replaced it. It reminded him of the night he stopped pretending to be a man and started becoming one. On a rainy Friday, Ethan stood in front of a class of interns and told them the story. He didn't hide his past. He said, "I used to think you could judge a person's future by their outfit. But then I met someone who wore worn-out shoes and had more power than anyone in that room. Because she had integrity. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time." He didn't name Jasmine. He didn't need to. The lesson had already planted its roots. That night, he received a handwritten card in the mail. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was familiar. Elegant. Clear. "The greatest apology is the life you choose after realizing your mistake." Meanwhile, Jasmine prepared for her upcoming lecture at Columbia University. The invitation had come after her Suffolk keynote went viral, shared by thousands online with comments ranging from, "This made me cry," to, "I'll never look at customer service the same way again." She didn't go viral because she yelled. She went viral because she stood. In the closing moments of her Columbia address, Jasmine said, "I don't believe in revenge. I believe in repair. I believe in showing up, not to demand power but to model it. Because when people see someone they underestimated standing tall, they start to wonder what else they've misunderstood." She looked at the students. Some nodded. Others wiped their eyes. "And when you walk into any room from this day forward, remember this. Your worth is not measured by who sees it. It is measured by how tightly you hold it when no one else does." As the applause rose, Jasmine didn't smile for attention. She smiled for herself. Because she had learned the secret. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in with worn shoes, and changes everything. In a world that often judges based on what we wear or what we drive, Jasmine Turner proved something powerful. That dignity isn't in your wallet. It's in how you stand tall when others expect you to shrink. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength can change everything. Subscribe for more powerful, true-inspired stories and leave a comment below, because your voice might be the one that helps change someone else's life.